September 1967. Somewhere near the Cambodian border, South Vietnam. The air inside the command bunker is heavy, thick with the smell of damp earth, stale tobacco, and the oppressive, inescapable humidity of the jungle. For the North Vietnamese army officers gathered around the map table, the night offers a rare moment of tactical confidence. They know the terrain. They know the enemy's rhythm. Standing in the shadows of the bunker is a man who does not belong to this jungle. He is a Soviet technical advisor, a specialist sent from Moscow to observe, analyze, and report on the effectiveness of American armor and air power. He has spent months watching the Americans fight. He knows their doctrine. He knows their machines. To him, and to the commanders of the North Vietnamese army, the American helicopter war has become predictable. The primary workhorse of the enemy is the UH-1 Iroquois, the Huey. It is a loud, lumbering beast. When it arrives, it announces itself with a rhythmic, thunderous thwack, 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 thwack that can be heard for miles. It is a transport bus with rotors. It is wide, slow, and soft. When the Hueys come in to land troops, they are vulnerable. The North Vietnamese gunners have learned exactly how to lead them with heavy machine guns. If you hit the wide glass nose, you kill the pilots. If you hit the engine block on top, the beast falls. The equation of the war has been solved. The Americans own the air with jets, but near the ground, their helicopters are flying targets. But tonight, a reconnaissance report arrives that makes no sense. A breathless forward scout bursts into the bunker. He is covered in mud, his eyes wide, trembling not with exhaustion, but with a specific kind of confusion that soldiers only feel when the rules of survival have suddenly changed. He reports an ambush on a supply column moving through a narrow river valley, a safe zone, where American jets cannot fly low due to the fog and the steep canyon walls. The scout says the column was destroyed. The Soviet advisor steps forward. He asks the standard questions. Was it artillery? No. Was it a phantom jet strike? No, the weather was too poor. Then, was it a gunship? A Huey, equipped with door gunners? The scout shakes his head violently. He describes something that does not exist in the Soviet Manual of War. He says they heard the sound of a helicopter, but it was different, faster, a tighter, angrier whine. The soldiers manning the anti-aircraft guns prepared to fire. They looked up, expecting the fat, wide silhouette of a Huey. They prepared to aim at a target that was 10 feet wide, but there was nothing to shoot at. The scout claims that the machine came out of the mist head-on, but it had no width. It was a sliver, a needle in the sky. It was barely 3 feet wide. Before the gunners could even find the silhouette in their sights, the jungle around them exploded. This was not the suppression fire of door gunners spraying bullets from the side of a transport. This was precision violence. Rockets rippled off the sides of the machine in pairs, striking the lead trucks with the accuracy of a sniper. Then, a turret under the nose of the machine tracked the running infantry with a terrifying, mechanical autonomy, spitting grenades and lead faster than a human operator could aim. And then, the impossible part. The machine did not flare and turn away like a sluggish transport. It dove. It accelerated. It vanished back into the mist, at a speed that rivaled a World War II fighter plane. The Soviet advisor dismisses the report as battlefield hysteria. A helicopter that is 3 feet wide? A helicopter that dives like a Stuka bomber? It is physically impossible. The engineering required to stack a pilot, a gunner, an engine, and heavy ordnance into a fuselage that thin does not exist. The Americans value comfort and capacity. They build buses, not sharks. He writes in his notebook that the unit was likely hit by friendly fire or a very lucky artillery strike. He goes back to his map. But 2 days later, the confusion turns into a pattern. Reports begin to trickle in from different sectors of the defensive line. Seasoned anti-aircraft crews, men who have shot down American aircraft before, are reporting engagements where they cannot score a hit. They describe a ghost that moves too fast to track. They talk about a machine that flies at treetop level, hiding behind the canopy, only to pop up, unleash a devastating volley of 70mm rockets, and disappear before the return fire can even reach it. The Soviet advisor travels to the site of one of these attacks to investigate the wreckage of a North Vietnamese PT-76 amphibious tank. The tank is a ruin. It has been cracked open. He inspects the impact angles. This was not a bomb dropped from 10,000 feet by a B-52. The angle of entry is shallow, almost horizontal. Whatever fired this rocket was looking the tank in the eye. He walks the perimeter. He finds casings. They are from a minigun, but the spread is incredibly tight. This was not a door gunner hanging out of a Huey, firing wildly while the helicopter shook. This was a stabilized weapon system, locked onto the target while the aircraft was moving at high speed. The advisor stands in the rain, looking at the burning metal. He realizes the Americans have introduced something new. They have not just modified a transport, they have changed the philosophy of vertical flight. He pulls a camera from his kit and takes pictures of the destruction. He needs to send this to Moscow. The Red Army relies on massed armor, thousands of T-54 tanks and T-55 tanks rushing across the plains of Europe. Their entire doctrine assumes that helicopters are soft targets that can be swatted out of the sky by anti-aircraft tanks. But if the Americans have built a dedicated Hunter, a machine that exists solely to kill tanks and vanish, then the Soviet armored doctrine is in grave danger. Who are you listening to? This is the channel Cold War Impact. If you want to uncover the hidden military history that shaped our modern world, make sure you subscribe and turn on notifications. We are just getting started. Back in the wet heat of Vietnam, the mystery deepens. The Soviet intelligence apparatus in Hanoi begins to scramble. They need eyes on this machine. They need to know what it looks like. Is it a new French design? Is it a secret prototype? The descriptions from the front lines are becoming more consistent and more disturbing. The soldiers call it the snake. They say it has no sides. When you look at it from the front, it is almost invisible. When you look at it from the side, it looks like a predatory fish. The Soviet advisor is under pressure. Moscow is demanding answers. The Kremlin has heard rumors of a gunship program, but they assumed it was just more Hueys with extra machine guns bolted to the floor. They did not expect a revolution in aerodynamics. 1 week later, the advisor gets his chance. A North Vietnamese regiment is planning a massive ambush on an American mechanized unit. They have heavy machine guns, rocket-propelled grenades, and recoilless rifles. They are baiting the trap. The advisor positions himself on a ridgeline, powerful binoculars in hand. He waits. He expects the Americans to call in the jets first, or perhaps the artillery. Instead, he hears that sound again. It is not the whop-whop of the Huey. It is a lower, more menacing growl, accompanied by the high-pitched whine of a turbine engine pushed to its limit. From behind the tree line they appear. They are not flying over the trees. They are flying through them. 2 silhouettes emerge, skimming the tall grass. The advisor freezes. He has never seen anything like this. They are incredibly slender. The cockpit is a tandem setup, one pilot sitting directly behind the other, like in a fighter jet, not side by side like in a transport or a car. This is why the fuselage is so narrow. It is a design choice purely for war, minimizing the frontal cross-section to make the aircraft harder to hit. It has stubby wings, but they are not for lift. They are racks. They are heavy with rocket pods. Under the nose, a turret swivels with a terrifying insect-like twitch. The Soviet advisor watches as the North Vietnamese gunners open fire. The tracers reach out, seeking the wide body of a helicopter that isn't there. The new machines bank hard, defying the physics of a normal rotorcraft. They don't just turn, they slide and snap into position. Smoke erupts from the stub wings. The advisor watches through his optics as the rockets impact the ambush positions with devastating accuracy. He is witnessing the birth of a new era of warfare. The transport era is over. The era of the attack helicopter has begun. But he still doesn't know what it is. He doesn't know its name, he doesn't know its top speed. And most importantly, he doesn't know that this machine is merely the first generation of a weapon that will eventually haunt the nightmares of every Soviet tank commander from Berlin to Kabul. He snaps a photograph just as the machine turns, catching the sunlight on its canopy. He needs to get this film to Hanoi. Moscow needs to know that the Americans have found a way to make a tank fly. Hanoi, late 1967. The room is bathed in the harsh red light of a photographic darkroom. The Soviet advisor stands over a developing tray, watching an image slowly materialize on the wet paper. The chemical smell is sharp, burning the nostrils, but his focus is absolute. As the image sharpens, the anomaly becomes undeniable. The advisor uses a pair of calipers to measure the dimensions of the aircraft in the photograph, comparing them to the known size of the American soldiers standing near the wreckage in the background. He does the math once, then he does it again. He stares at the number, perplexed. 38 inches. The fuselage of this new machine is only 38 inches wide. It is barely wider than the shoulders of the pilot flying it. This number, 38 inches, represents a radical, terrifying departure from every known principle of helicopter design. For decades, the philosophy of rotorcraft, both in the Soviet Union and the West, was governed by utility. You build a box, you put a rotor on top, and you fill the box with troops, cargo, or stretchers. The bigger the box, the better the helicopter. The Me-4 and the American Huey were simply flying trucks. But the Americans have thrown the box away. The advisor picks up his report, which is rapidly growing into a dossier of concern for the Kremlin. He begins to piece together the engineering logic of this new enemy. By seating the crew in tandem, the gunner in the front, the pilot in the back, elevated slightly for visibility, the Americans have reduced the aircraft's frontal cross-section by nearly 2/3 compared to a Huey. From the perspective of a North Vietnamese gunner on the ground, trying to aim a DSK heavy machine gun, the target has effectively vanished. Hitting a Huey was like shooting at a barn door. Hitting this is like shooting at the edge of a ruler. But the mystery goes deeper than just the shape. It is the speed of the deployment that baffles the Soviet intelligence community. Developing a new military aircraft is a monumental task. It usually takes 5 to 7 years of wind tunnel testing, engine development, and prototyping. The Soviet Bureau, the Mil Design Bureau, is currently experimenting with armed helicopter concepts, but they are years away from production. Yet, this American machine has appeared out of nowhere. There were no spy photos of it in 1965, there were no rumors of it in 1966, and now, in late '67, they are swarming the skies of South Vietnam. How did the Americans achieve this industrial miracle? The advisor digs through piles of technical manuals captured from downed American Hueys. He looks at the engine specifications of the UH-1, the Lycoming T-53 turboshaft. He looks at the transmission systems, the rotor hub assemblies. Then, the realization hits him. It is a moment of cold, professional admiration mixed with dread. The Americans didn't build a new aircraft from scratch. They cheated. They took the engine, the transmission, and the rotor system, the guts of the reliable Huey, and they simply bolted a new, streamlined body onto it. It is a masterpiece of pragmatic engineering. They skipped years of mechanical development by using proven components. While Soviet engineers were debating theoretical aerodynamics, the manufacturer, Bell Helicopter, had simply taken a grinder to the Huey and turned it into a weapon. They call it the Model 209 in the intercepted radio chatter. But the troops have a different name for it, Cobra. The name fits. It strikes fast, injects its poison, and retreats. But as the weeks drag on, the advisor realizes that the engineering is only half the problem. The real threat is the tactical evolution. The Cobra isn't flying alone. Intelligence reports from the Ashau Valley describe a new, terrifying tactic. The Americans are pairing the sleek, deadly Cobras with small, erratic observation helicopters, the OH-6 Cayuse, known as the Loach. The Loach flies low, dangerously low, buzzing the treetops, acting as mechanical bait. They want the North Vietnamese infantry to shoot at them. They are provoking a response. The moment a North Vietnamese soldier fires his AK-47 or unmasks a camouflage position to track the Loach, the trap snaps shut. The Loach marks the target with red smoke, and high above, circling silently like a hawk, the Cobra rolls in. The advisor reads the casualty reports. Entire anti-aircraft platoons are being wiped out by these hunter-killer teams. The Loach finds, the Cobra kills. The synergy is devastating. The Cobra carries 14 rockets and thousands of rounds of minigun ammunition. It dives at 190 miles per hour. It doesn't just suppress the enemy, it hunts them. But the Soviet advisor is looking at the bigger picture. He is looking at Europe. He walks over to the large strategic map of the Fulda Gap on the wall of his safe house. This is where World War III would happen. The Soviet strategy relies on the deep battle doctrine, sending waves of T-54 tanks, T-55 tanks, and the new T-62 tanks smashing through the NATO lines. The Soviet army assumes that NATO will try to stop these tanks with other tanks, or with fixed-wing aircraft that are vulnerable to Soviet surface-to-air missiles. But if the Americans bring the Cobra to Europe, the advisor imagines a column of T-62 tanks moving through a German forest. They are heavy, blind to the world above the tree line. Suddenly, a flight of Cobras pops up from behind a ridge, 3 kilometers away. They are too low for radar to detect. They are too small to be seen by the tank commanders. They unleash a barrage of rockets and vanish before the tank turrets can even rotate. The tank, the king of the ground war, is suddenly obsolete. This is the nightmare the advisor must convey to Moscow. The balance of power has shifted. The helicopter is no longer a support vehicle. It is a tank destroyer. He sits at his typewriter. He needs to draft a request for immediate technological countermeasures. The Soviet Union needs a response. They need a machine that can fly with the Cobras, hunt them, and protect the tank columns. He types the header, "Urgent recommendation for the development of a heavy assault helicopter." He does not know it yet, but this memo will eventually lead to the creation of the Mi-24, the Hind. But that is years away. Right now, the Americans have the monopoly on death from the hover. Just as he finishes typing, a new report lands on his desk. It is classified top secret. It comes from a spy ring operating within the US defense industry. The report details a new upgrade program for the Cobra. The advisor scans the document, and his blood runs cold. The current Cobras are firing unguided rockets. They have to aim the whole helicopter to shoot. It is inaccurate at long range, but the report mentions a new acronym. TOW. Tube. Launched. Optically. Tracked. Wire. Guided. The Americans are not just satisfied with rockets. They are about to fit the Cobra with a missile that can be steered by the gunner all the way to the target. A missile that can punch through the frontal armor of a T-55 tank from 3,000 meters away. The advisor realizes the suspense is over. The mystery of the skinny helicopter has been solved, but the horror is just beginning. The Americans are about to turn their tank hunter into a sniper, and the Soviets have nothing, absolutely nothing that can stop it. Or so they think, because deep in the Vietnamese jungle, something has been captured. A damaged Cobra, forced down by mechanical failure, lying relatively intact in the mud. The North Vietnamese are dragging it out with elephants. The advisor grabs his kit. He is going to see the beast in the flesh. He is going to crawl inside the cockpit, and he is going to find its weakness. The jungle floor vibrates as the immense grey shape of an elephant emerges from the canopy, dragging a sled of bamboo and camouflage netting. On the sled lies the prize. It is broken, the tail boom snapped, the rotors bent like dead petals. But it is here. The Soviet advisor approaches the captured AH-1 Cobra with the reverence of a coroner approaching a body that holds the secret to a plague. He runs his hand along the skin of the aircraft. It is thin aluminum. He taps it. It rings hollow. There is no heavy armor here. The Americans have sacrificed protection for speed. This machine relies entirely on not being seen, and if seen, not being hit. He climbs onto the skid and levers himself into the front cockpit, the gunner's seat. It is incredibly cramped. The glass canopy wraps around him, offering a terrifyingly unobstructed view of the world below. He realizes that to sit here is to sit inside the tip of a spear. You are the first thing to arrive at the battle. But it is the device in front of him that captures his full attention. It is a pantographic sight, a mechanical aiming system linked to the turret under the nose. He grips the controls. Even with the power off, the mechanical linkage moves the turret with eerie precision. He looks through the optics. And then, he finds the modification. This specific Cobra has been altered. There is a new panel, a new set of optics that look more sophisticated than the standard rocket sights. The intelligence report was right. The Americans are testing something new. He climbs out, his mind racing. He needs to see this in action. The static machine tells him how it is built, but it does not tell him how it kills. The opportunity arrives in the spring of 1972, the Easter Offensive. The North Vietnamese army launches a massive conventional invasion of the South. This is not a guerrilla war anymore. This is a Soviet-style deep battle operation. Hundreds of T-54 tanks and PT-76 tanks are rolling down Highway 14 toward the city of Kontum. They are supported by the pride of the Soviet air defense network, the ZSU-234 Shilka. The Shilka is a terrifying weapon. It is a 4-barreled, radar-guided anti-aircraft tank that spews thousands of rounds per minute. It is designed to shred low-flying jets. The Soviet advisor is confident. The Cobras rely on rockets. To fire rockets, they must dive toward the target. If they dive at the tanks, they must fly straight into the teeth of the Shilka. The trap is set. The Soviet tanks roll into the open valley, exposing themselves. The Shilka radars spin, scanning the horizon, hungry for the aluminum signature of a Cobra. The advisor watches from a command bunker overlooking the valley. The morning mist burns off. The tanks grind forward, their diesel engines roaring. Then, the radio crackles. Helicopters sighted. Range, 3,000 meters. The advisor smiles. 3,000 meters is too far for rockets. The Cobras will have to close the distance. They will have to come within 1,000 meters to be effective. As soon as they do, the Shilkas will tear them apart. But the Cobras do not close the distance. Through his binoculars, the advisor sees them. 3 tiny specks hovering just above the tree line, far down the valley. They are not diving. They are not moving fast. They are just hovering. This is wrong. A helicopter that hovers in a combat zone is a dead helicopter. It is a stationary target. Why are they not attacking? A North Vietnamese commander asks, confused. Wait, the advisor whispers. They are waiting for air support, but no jets appear. Instead, a small puff of white smoke erupts from the stub wing of the lead Cobra. Something flies off the rail. It is not a rocket. It is slower. It flies with a strange wobbling motion, correcting itself as it flies. A thin, almost invisible copper wire trails behind it, spooling out from the helicopter like a spider's web. The projectile takes seconds to cross the valley. It feels like an eternity. The Soviet advisor watches the bright flare on the tail of the missile. It flies straight and true, guided by the gunner's hand in that cramped cockpit 3 kilometers away. The gunner is simply keeping his crosshairs on the lead T-54 tank. The computer sends corrections down the wire. The T-54 tank commander never sees it coming. He is looking for a diving aircraft. He is not looking for a silent assassin firing from beyond the horizon. Crack! The missile slams into the turret of the lead tank. The shaped charge warhead burns through the heavy Soviet steel as if it were butter. The ammunition inside the tank detonates, blowing the turret 10 feet into the air. The valley erupts in panic. The Shilka crews spin their turrets, frantically searching for the enemy, but their radar is confused. The Cobras are hovering so low, so still, that the radar thinks they are part of the hillside. The ground clutter hides them completely. Another puff of smoke. Another wire-guided death. The advisor watches in horror as the second T-54 explodes. Then a third. The Cobras are dismantling the armored column piece by piece. Systematically, surgically. They are out of range of the tank guns. They are invisible to the radar. And they are too far away for the heavy machine guns to be accurate. This is the twist that the Soviet military never predicted. The Cobra is no longer just a rocket artillery platform. It has become a sniper. The weapon is the BGM-71 Tau missile. The advisor realizes with a sinking heart that the era of the tank's invincibility is over. The Americans have successfully married a missile to a helicopter. The Shilka crews are desperate. They begin firing blindly into the distance, spraying the distant tree line with 23mm shells. The Cobras simply drop down behind the trees. They vanish. The shells cut harmlessly through the leaves. A minute later, the Cobras pop up again, 500 meters to the left. Pop up, lock on, fire, drop down. It is a game of peek-a-boo played with high explosives. And the tanks are losing. By the time the engagement ends, the road to Kontum is a graveyard of burning Soviet armor. The advisor walks away from the viewport, his face pale. He realizes that the strategy for World War III, the massive rush of armor across Germany, is now fundamentally flawed. If 10 Cobras can stop a regiment in Vietnam, what will 500 Cobras do to the Red Army in Europe? He needs to send a new report. The previous report asked for a heavy assault helicopter, the future Hind. But now, he needs to ask for something else. He needs a weapon that can look down. He needs a portable missile that infantry can carry to hunt these helicopters in the bushes. But as he prepares his report, a new piece of intelligence arrives from the KGB. It is a technical schematic, stolen from a US contractor. It details the next phase of the Cobra's evolution. And this one doesn't just threaten the tanks, it threatens the silence of the night. The Americans are trying to give the Cobra eyes that can see in the dark. Until now, the North Vietnamese moved their supplies at night. The darkness was their shield. The Cobras slept when the sun went down. But if the Americans achieve thermal imaging, if they can see the heat of a truck engine through the jungle canopy at midnight. The advisor realizes the mystery isn't just about the machine's shape or its missiles. It is about the Americans' obsession with total sensory dominance. He packs his bag. He has to leave the front. The Americans are launching a new operation, and rumors say they are testing a Night Hunter variant. He needs to witness this final horror before he can return to Moscow. Because if the Cobra learns to see in the dark, the war is lost. The night over the central highlands of Vietnam is not dark. It is a suffocating, heavy blanket of black velvet. For the North Vietnamese tank crews hiding their T-54 tanks in the dense foliage, the night is usually their ally. It is the only time the American jets, the Phantoms and the Skyhawks cannot see them. The darkness renders the American air superiority meaningless. Or so they believe. The Soviet advisor sits in a concealed position near the tank Liga. He checks his watch. It is 2 a.m. The jungle is alive with the sound of insects, masking the rumble of the idling diesel engines. The plan is to move under the cover of darkness, repositioning the armored column for a dawn assault. But then, the sound returns. It is distinct. The rhythmic thwack-thwack of the heavy transport helicopters is missing. Instead, there is the high-pitched turbine whine of the predators. The Cobras are hunting at night. The tank commanders are not worried. They know that without searchlights, which would give away the American positions, the helicopter pilots are blind. You cannot hit what you cannot see. Suddenly, the jungle floor is bathed in a surreal artificial daylight. It does not come from the sun. It comes from the sky. The Americans have deployed a new variant, the NOGS Night Observation Gunship System. But even without the experimental tech, they are using powerful xenon searchlights mounted on the skids, capable of switching between visible light and infrared. To the naked eye of the North Vietnamese soldiers, the jungle remains dark. But to the Cobra pilots wearing specialized goggles, the world has turned green. The infrared beams cut through the darkness like invisible lighthouses, painting the warm engines of the Soviet tanks. The advisor watches through his own night vision scope a bulky, primitive Soviet device and gasps. The Cobras are not flying randomly. They are lining up. The lead Cobra pilot, looking through his telescopic sight, sees the heat signature of the T-54's engine exhaust glowing like a beacon. He aligns the crosshairs. He squeezes the trigger. The darkness is torn apart by the launch of a TOW missile. The bright flare of the missile motor blinds the advisor for a second. When his vision clears, the lead tank is a burning pyre. Panic seizes the column. The tank commanders button up their hatches, blindly slewing their turrets, trying to find the enemy. But the enemy is a ghost. The Cobras fire from the shadows, relocate, and fire again. They are using the confusion of the night to amplify the terror. For the Soviet advisor, this is the final, crushing revelation. The Americans have conquered the night. The 24-hour battlefield has arrived. There is no sanctuary, there is no rest. The return to Moscow. Weeks later, the advisor stands in a sterile, high-ceilinged briefing room in the Kremlin. The mood is somber. The generals of the Red Army, men with chests heavy with medals from the Great Patriotic War, sit around a long oak table. They are men who believe in steel, in weight, in numbers. They believe that 50,000 tanks rolling across the plains of Germany cannot be stopped. The advisor places his report on the table. It is titled simply, "The Asymmetric Threat of Rotary Wing Anti-Tank Systems." He begins to speak, and his voice echoes in the silence. "Comrades," he says, "we have built our strategy on a false premise. We assumed that the tank is the predator, but in Vietnam, we have learned that the tank is now the prey." He projects the photographs he took in the jungle, the slender silhouette of the Cobra, the burning hulks of the T-54 tanks, the wire-guided missile launchers. The Americans, he explains, have solved the problem of mass. They do not intend to match us tank for tank. They have realized that it is cheaper to build a helicopter that can kill 10 tanks than it is to build 10 tanks of their own. He pauses, letting the economic reality sink in. A T-62 tank costs us hundreds of thousands of rubles. It requires a crew of 4. It requires fuel trucks, maintenance depots, and rail transport. The American missile costs a fraction of that, and the platform that fires it, the Cobra, can travel at 300 kilometers per hour, indifferent to rivers, minefields, or mountains. One of the generals slams his hand on the table. "But they are fragile. A single 23mm shell can bring one down. Yes, the advisor admits. But first you must hit it, and to hit it, you must see it. The Cobra does not fly like a plane, it flies like a soldier crawling through the grass. It uses the terrain. It pops up, kills, and drops down. Our radar cannot see it. Our heavy guns are too slow to track it. He moves to the map of Europe, the Fulda Gap, the North German Plain. If we invade West Germany tomorrow, the advisor continues, pointing to the map, our columns will be stuck on the roads. The Americans will not meet us with tanks in the open. They will wait behind the hills with hundreds of these Cobras. They will destroy the lead vehicles, blocking the roads. Then, they will pick apart the column at their leisure. It will be a slaughter. The room falls silent. The shock has finally arrived in Moscow. The realization is total. The Soviet numerical advantage, the fear of the red steamroller, has been neutralized by a helicopter that is barely 38 inches wide. The intelligence provided by the advisor triggers a massive industrial panic within the Soviet Union. The Kremlin issues an immediate directive. We must match this capability. But the Soviet philosophy is different. They cannot simply copy the Cobra. They do not trust their pilots to fly solo in the wilderness. They want a machine that represents their own doctrine, brute force. This panic leads directly to the creation of the Mi-24, known to NATO as the Hind. It is a beast. Unlike the slender Cobra, the Hind is massive. It is a flying tank, heavily armored, capable of carrying 8 troops in the back. It is designed to take a hit and keep flying. It is the Soviet answer to the Cobra's agility, pure durability and firepower. But the race does not end there. The Soviet engineers work feverishly to develop their own anti-tank missiles, the Falanga, and later the Sturm, to give the Hind the same long-range killing power as the Cobra. They also rush the development of new mobile air defense systems. The ZSU-234 Shilka is upgraded. The 2K-22 Tunguska, a terrifying hybrid of cannons and missiles, is designed specifically to hunt hovering helicopters. The Cold War enters a new phase. It is no longer just about nuclear missiles. It is a game of cat and mouse played at treetop level. The advisor's story ends, but the story of the machine does not. The AH-1 Cobra did not just change the Vietnam War, it changed the DNA of the American military. It proved the concept of the attack helicopter so thoroughly that the US Army launched a program to build an even more advanced successor. They took everything they learned from the Cobra, the need for night vision, the need for heavy armor, the need for even better missiles, and they built the AH-64 Apache. But the Cobra did not retire. The US Marine Corps, falling in love with the machine's rugged simplicity and small footprint, perfect for aircraft carriers, kept it. They upgraded it. They gave it 2 engines, the Super Cobra. They gave it a new rotor system. They gave it the Hellfire missile. Fast forward to 1991, the Persian Gulf. Saddam Hussein has built the 4th largest army in the world. He has thousands of Soviet-made tanks, T-55 seconds, T-62 seconds, and the feared T-72 seconds. His strategy is exactly the one the Soviet advisor warned about decades earlier. Dug in, massed armor waiting for a ground fight. But the ground fight never happens the way Saddam expects. On the morning of the invasion, hundreds of AH-1W Super Cobras and AH-64 Apaches sweep across the desert floor. They fly at 30 feet, kicking up sand. The Iraqi tank crews, trained in Soviet doctrine, are waiting for tanks. Instead, they hear a low hum. The massacre that follows is the grim fulfillment of the prophecy written in the Vietnamese jungle. The Cobras, using advanced thermal imaging, spot the Iraqi tanks through the smoke of burning oil wells. They fire Hellfire missiles and Tau missiles from 4 kilometers away. The Iraqi tanks explode without ever seeing their enemy. In one engagement, a flight of Cobras destroys a battalion of tanks in minutes. The highway of death is littered with the burning skeletons of Soviet-designed armor. The Soviet advisor, now an old man living in a crumbling Soviet Union, watches the news footage on his television. He sees the graining black and white footage from the gun camera of a helicopter. He sees the crosshairs settle on a T-72. He sees the silent explosion. He nods slowly. He was right. The 38-inch wide machine, the Snake, had choked the life out of the armored age. The AH-1 Cobra was more than just a helicopter. It was a paradigm shift. It was the moment warfare moved from 2 dimensions to 3. It forced every army on Earth to look up and tremble. Today, the legacy continues. The AH-1Z Viper still flies for the US Marines, a direct descendant of that first skinny prototype. It is faster, deadlier, and smarter. But if you strip away the digital sensors and the composite rotors, the soul of the machine is the same. It is a hunter. It is a tank killer. And it remains the enduring symbol of American dominance during the Cold War. This has been the story of the AH-1 Cobra. If you enjoyed this deep dive into military history and the hidden stories of the Cold War, make sure you are subscribed to Cold War Impact. We have more stories of espionage, technology, and strategy coming your way. Leave a comment below. Do you think the tank is obsolete in the age of the drone and the attack helicopter? Or does heavy armor still have a place on the modern battlefield? I'll see you in the next briefing.